Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, very good morning. It's a great pleasure to participate in this conference and address such a distinguished guest. My presentation is basically going to rotate around the implementation of a strategy, one of the exciting and successful strategies in the government of the United Arab Emirates. The organization of the presentation, I'll start with a short introduction where I'll talk about the use and the application of strategies both in public and private sectors. Then I'll talk about, again, the journey of the strategy development at Emirates Identity Authority, trying to shed light on the approach that was followed and also explaining the different components that constituted the strategic approach followed at Emirates Identity Authority. Finally, I'll conclude my presentation with a set of recommendations and some reflections. So, to begin with, the first thing that comes to my mind whenever I think about strategies is basically the private sector. Private sector use strategies to, for survivability and surviving those competing markets in today's very tough competitive markets to create competitive advantage driven by profitability. When I compare the private sector to the public sector, the set of priorities and objectives in government and public sector organizations are somewhat different. They tend to focus more on sustainability rather than on profitability. So they talk about terms like social sustainability, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, and so on and so forth. The citizens are similar to private sector. When we talk about private sector, customers are actually the game changer in private sector. Citizens are also changing the games in government sector, specifically for public sector organizations and how they actually operate. This is pushing public sector organizations to follow same practices in the private sector. Indeed, when we talk about strategies, it involves changing from point A to point B. The psychological constructed assumption in the practitioner's world states that we tend as practitioners to think that everything will go according to our plans, and as we actually visualize how the future will look like. However, the reality is very much different. When we talk about, the strategies in reality, once they are actually executed, it involves too much change, and depending on the degree of the change, the journey could be very much chaotic and problematic. Looking at different studies that researched how strategies are being executed, it gives us very horrific sort of stories about how strategies are being executed. The studies indicate that 2/3 of strategies basically fail. Looking at private sector, they are very much dynamic. They are, very much, faster to adapt to changes. Whereas the public sector, and because of their bureaucratic environment that they actually operate in, and the slow nature of responding to change in the environment, we come to argue that the failure in public sector is very much predominant. Organizations, be it public sector or private sector, they need to understand, they need to comprehend thoroughly and learn about new terms and concepts underpinning the business world today. Indeed, Emirates Identity Authority was established at the end of 2004. We didn't have a strategy until 2007. We had to develop a strategy at that point, and we assumed that the strategy would again go the way that we developed it. The fact was that the journey was very much chaotic. In 2009, we did an evaluation of this strategy, and we found that even was, point B, the journey was, the outcome and the main objective was not even clear. So what we had to do was to replan and revise the strategy in the beginning of 2009. We devised a new strategy, 2010-2013, and we also thought that by following a structured strategic approach and employing best practices, the journey would be very much simple and easy to achieve the target. However, the execution, once again, it was very much chaotic, but we managed through, to pass through this chaotic journey and to achieve B. And I'll be talking about this. Let me start from the end, and I'll come back to the beginning of the story. We were able, in the circle of 2010-2013 strategy, to achieve 97% of the set strategic objectives. Customer satisfaction was up from 60% to above 90%. We were able to save hundreds of billions of dirhams. We started becoming a more self-sufficient organization rather than being dependent on government game financing. The efficiency and effectiveness of internal business processes were multifold, and even other KPIs we were performing in very much incredible sort of performance. Emirates Identity Authority, as was again introduced in the beginning, was recognized as the best federal organization in the government of the United Arab Emirates, part of the Excellence Program in 2011. Today, Emirates Identity Authority is considered to be very much a benchmark for best practices in strategy development, organizational development, as well as in very much technical terms when we talk about identity management. The strategy at Emirates Identity Authority definitely went through ups and downs. We used different prescriptions to control the journey of the strategy development and execution. I'll try to shed light very much quickly on what actually happened and what was the key success factors behind the success of the strategy at Emirates Identity Authority. The diagram that you show on the screen, it depicts the approach that was followed by Emirates Identity Authority. It depicts the journey of the strategy implementation at Emirates Identity Authority in 3 circles. I'll talk about each circle in more detail in a second. The inner circle, it represented the quintessential performance dimensions of strategy, customers, human resources, processes, and financials. I'll elaborate on that in a second. The 2 wings that we focused very much on was for the organization need to become result-oriented rather than focusing on outputs. That was an important one side of the wing. The second one, it was important for us to think innovatively. Innovation was important for us to fly towards our objectives. Let me look at the inner circle in more detail. We had produced a number of hundreds of pages of strategy documents. However, the strategy that we communicated to all our stakeholders was very much in this one-page slide. The mission, the vision, the strategic intents, the objectives, as well as the priorities of each objective was clarified in this page, plus the corporate values. 2 things were also again associated with strategy development. One was the operating model, which showed us how the organization is going to transition and to change in short term, medium term, as well as in longer terms. That was very much important for us to understand, when and what change we need to introduce. Using a balanced scorecard for performance management, it was very much important for us to cascade this strategy onto the levels of individuals, so we were able to monitor and review performance at individual as well as departmental and organizational levels. Human resources, fundamental. It was very much important for us to address the aspects of how we develop human resources at Emirates Identity Authority. So we followed an international standard without reinventing the wheel. We focused on the 10 axes of investors and people. Business processes, indeed, we had to identify those core competencies that we need to heed and pay attention to. The 80-20 rule was very much applied to identifying those core competencies. The 3 E's rule was actually applied, the 3 E's of efficiency, effectiveness, and the efficacy of the procedures and processes that we employed at Emirates Identity Authority. As well, we also had to consider different approaches of how we do these, how we design these processes, whether they are actually implemented internally, outsourced, or done through partnerships. Indeed, this supported the financials at Emirates Identity Authority and the performance of the financial dimension at Emirates Identity Authority. It gives us, the concept of outsourcing and partnership, partnering with government organizations as well as the private sector. It also addressed the key priorities like reducing cost, focusing on core functions, improving quality, and increasing speed. Having talked about the inner circle, let me talk about now the second circle, very, very quickly as well. The second circle represented two circles as well, the inner circle and the outer circle. The inner one concentrated on the foundations, on the foundational activities, and the second circle, the outer ring, concentrated on the differentiation activity. The inner ring represents, for example, the first, one of the activities that we had to pay attention to is the organizational structure. It was important that we design an organizational structure which is aligned to the strategy, clarifying the roles of responsibility as well as ownership and accountability. And we had to change the organizational structure at different intervals. We changed the organizational structure in the beginning of the strategy, in the after 2 years, and towards the end of the strategy. We also had to, again, put in place different policies and procedures, part of the governance framework at Emirates Identity Authority. That was also aligned to the EFQ model at Emirates Identity Authority. Work environments had to be redesigned, and also different incentive systems had to be put in place to support motivation and productivity at Emirates Identity Authority. This required careful attention by the top management. Then we come to the outside ring, which is more about, again, how we have created the differentiation at Emirates Identity Authority. From a public sector organization, different than private sector, the focus was not really as much as on cost, but more on the internal activities. So we have used, for example, EFQ model that provided us with guiding principles as to how we should develop organizational excellence. Again, before I talk about the BPR, different quality managements were also employed to ensure, that we have, we are implementing and we are following international standards whenever it comes to the development of different management processes at Emirates Identity Authority. An important, again, I believe that one of the key success factors behind the success of the Emirates Identity strategy was the initiative of business process reengineering. Many strategies fail because they try to imagine that then as the organization is actually doing its work, it will again succeed by just having a new strategy. BPR was fundamental. It was important for us to be able to improve the service quality, as well as improving the efficiency, effectiveness, and efficacy of different objectives that we set at the strategy level. Converting the organization to focus and become a learning organization was something also fundamental. Many organizations don't really pay attention to this dimension. We try to support our employees to, the organization as a whole, to promote learning at individual, group, as well as organizational levels, and also to push the people to think outside the books. For example, people tend to always address problems in single loop format. We try to push the people to be double loop thinkers rather than just focusing on, again, addressing problems the same traditional ways. Again, another example of what, part of the organizational learning and knowledge management, we tried, we created an organizational, brain sort of knowledge excellence library. This was very much important. Organizations basically fail to maintain and retain knowledge in the organization. People tend to leave the organization from now and then. It was important for us to capture the tacit and implicit knowledge that was there in the brains of the people and get them into explicit form and inject it back into the organization to improve the knowledge base at Emirates Identity Authority. This takes us to the last, again, to the third circle, and the last circle of the approach that we have actually followed. depicts the inner ring, depicts the communication side, and the outer ring represents the leadership and decision-making functions. Basically, when we talk about again the communication side, communication is absolutely essential. Or if you need your strategies to succeed, then you have got to pay particular attention to how you communicate. We had to devise again and put in place a change management plan that supported us to see how the organization is actually transitioning, and to ensure that productivity is being sustained and maintained during the different change that the organization was actually going through. We used the concept of gamification to transfer knowledge and to communicate. Engaging the stakeholders, it was very much also important to ensure that again the stakeholders are actually involved into the organization. For public government organizations, it's important for them to have a social media strategy in place. So we had to devise one at Emirates Identity Authority. Today we have got more than 16 channels that are actually open to customers to voice in and interact with Emirates Identity Authority. The last circle in the approach that we have actually followed at Emirates Identity Authority, it's more about leadership, and where the focus of leadership need to be again directed towards. Project management was absolutely foundational at Emirates Identity Authority. We had to manage projects, and we had to even create a project management office to monitor and control again projects, not to manage projects. The management of projects was assigned to the responsible departments. We have also spent time in devising and developing a decision support systems. Again, if I say, if I had to reflect on, what were the key success factors behind the success of the strategy, this, again, what you see on the slide depicts a careful review and monitoring exercise that we performed at Emirates Identity Authority. That represents basically a weekly management meeting at Emirates Identity Authority that actually started from the beginning. It was 2 weeks in the beginning. Then we had to again intensify it. Until today, we have got weekly management meetings where we discuss the performance and we make daily decisions when actually needed. This was in a nutshell the architecture and the approach that we have actually followed to ensure that our strategy was successful. So this takes us to the final part of my presentation. What you see on the screen right now are, for example, the top 10 reasons identified by the different studies that were performed to analyze why strategies fail. If we do some sort of a microscopic zoom-in view into these factors, we find that most of the factors are related to communication. Organizations face resistance because basically they fail to communicate. And 90% of the time it's related to communication. When we talk about awareness, it's related to communication. Poor communication, by the name, it's related to communication. Team involvement. People, again, how we can support the involvement of the teams if we are not communicating clearly, what are their roles and how they can participate and engage in the journey of the strategy development. The goals clarity are very much also related to communication. We tend and we are used as practitioners to devise very careful strategies to some extent, but we fail to communicate them. It's important, again, for the organizations to start looking at the solutions rather than just, again, having, without proper communication, organizations fail to go to the up the ladder and take the whole organization to focus on the solutions. But again, we have a culture. If we don't communicate well, we will have a culture where we pass blames, where people have got different excuses for explaining why they couldn't actually do their work as it was planned. The role of leadership is absolutely fundamental. Leadership are the ones who have got the holistic picture. They are the ones who get the pieces together and make the bigger picture. The leadership role is to push the organization to focus on the results and creating results where basically, and as a practitioner, and from the experience that we had in different projects, if we don't have proper leadership in organizations, and as well as leadership at different, even at the departmental level, people tend to think on trivial issues that don't really contribute to the bigger picture. Strategies need to be linked to the supply chain of the organization. This is not just for private sector, this is also for public sector. So it's very much important that we link our strategies to the value chain at our organizations. Also, organizations need to learn how to start from the end. It's where people are not able to visualize how the strategy is going to look like. Indeed, for strategies to be a success, we need, again, enabled leadership. We need a strategic framework on which organizations should actually follow. There is no right or wrong approach in strategy implementation. It's very much dependent on the circumstances that leadership emerge or exist in organizations. With that, I conclude my presentation. I hope that again the material and the content was as digestive as I actually designed it. I had to stick with the time frame that was actually allowed to me. If you need to read more about again our strategy, the 2010-2013 strategy, or the new strategy 2014-2016, you can visit our website, download the different booklets that we have developed. It explains the journey in more details. If you'd like to also read about some reflections from practitioners' perspective, you can also download the articles that we have developed in the past few years. If you have got any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm here to in the coming half an hour. Thank you very much.